might not know, but Ethan was supposed to speak this morning. Ethan from Ethan and Sonia. But when I found out on Friday about Elsie, I immediately knew that I wasn't going to let Ethan rush back here to speak on Sunday, even though he wanted to. He did want to. He wanted to come back. He was committed to it. And he has a fantastic sermon prepared for us. But don't worry. You'll get to hear that next week or the week after. Actually, I think it is next weech for sure. So you will get to hear it next week, which will be fantastic. But for today, that means you're stuck with me, which will be good. So buckle up. This morning, I simply want to share some of my story with you. I've been a pastor here for a number of years, and the church has grown, and not everyone may know how I met Jesus and how he saved me and came into my life. So I want to share a bit of my story with you, and seeing as we're looking through the book of Psalms this summer, I've weaved a psalm into it that fits perfectly and that has always been really meaningful to me. You guys know those moments where you look back at your life and you realize just how differently things could have turned out. Right? Maybe it's one decision, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a conversation, an ordinary day that ended up changing everything. Right? It's the moments where you kind of stop and think, you're like, poof, if that didn't happen, I don't know where I would be today. Sure, most of us have had those kind of moments. Some of us think of like an accident that we walked away from. Others might think about a relationship that nearly defined us negatively. Maybe it's an illness or grief or a season of anxiety. And maybe it's a choice that you wish you could take back. Maybe it's not that dramatic. Maybe it's just you kind of like slowly drifted. There was like one compromise, one disappointment became a second disappointment, until one day you looked around and you're like, how did I end up here? It's one of those reasons why I love the book of Psalms is because the Psalms doesn't pretend life is neat. It doesn't pretend faith is easy. It gives words to people who are celebrating. It gives words to people who are grieving, people who are angry, people who are confused, people who are desperately waiting for God to do something. And this morning, I want to look at one of those Psalms, Psalm 40. And I think it's honestly one of the most beautiful pictures in Scripture of what God does with human life. Not just how he rescues us, but what he rescues us for. Psalm 40, verse 1-3 reads this: I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God, that many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. David gives us these three pictures: a rock, a pit, a rock, and a song. That's the whole journey, right? So today I kind of want to walk through those pictures, because I don't think that it's just David's story here. I think we can see ourselves in this story, in these pictures. And I think it really is the story that God has been telling throughout the Bible. David starts by painting this incredible picture with just a few lines. I waited patiently for the Lord. Now, if you're anything like me, that's already a hard sentence. I don't like waiting. Most of us don't like waiting. We wait in traffic, we wait in doctor's office, we wait for test results, we wait for relationships to heal, we wait for prayers to be answered, and sometimes we wait for God to feel like he's finally paying attention to us. He says, I waited patiently for the Lord. And in English, that kind of sounds a little bit peaceful. Like David made himself a cup of coffee, he found a nice spot on the beach looking over the ocean and thought, yep, whenever you're ready, God, I'm here waiting patiently. But that isn't really the picture. The Hebrew language is kind of interesting. It literally reads, waiting, I waited. Or I waited, and I waited, and I waited. It's a Hebrew way of emphasizing the action. It's the same as the Shema means to not just listen, but to listen, listen really well. David isn't saying here he just waited for an afternoon or even a long weekend. He's saying that there was a season of life where waiting was all he knew. It's the kind of waiting where you start to ask those questions that you're a little bit afraid to ask out loud. God, are you listening? Do you see what's happening in front of me? Have you forgotten about me? David was in this place where I think we find ourselves from one time and another in our lives, asking God if he is even there. But there's something in this first part that I don't want us to miss, because David gets one verb: I waited. That's it. That's all he gets. And then suddenly the focus shifts. He turned, he heard, he lifted, he set my feet on a rock. He gave me a new song. David contributes one thing, and God does everything else. And I love that. I love it, because it reminds us that this psalm isn't about how good David was at waiting. It's about how good God is at rescuing. David doesn't say eventually, yeah, I've figured it out. He doesn't be like, yep, eventually I came strong enough to climb myself out of that pit. Instead, he says, he turned to me. Or maybe your transition said, he inclined to me. And I love that image. I love the image of inclining, like God bends down like a child, like to whisper to a child. He doesn't stand shouting from a distance. He leans in, he gets close. And that's the whole story of the Bible, right? When Adam and Eve hid, God came looking. When Israel cries out from slavery, God comes down. When the world is lost in sin, Jesus enters into that world. The story of Scripture isn't humanity climbing up their way to God. It's God continually moving towards people who can't rescue themselves. And this gives me so much hope. It legitimately does. Because there was a season of my life where I wasn't moving towards God at all. In fact, I was actively walking the other direction. I grew up in a Christian home, a very loving home, fantastic. I had a great upbringing. I love it. I have fond memories of it. We were a church family. We would always go to church. We would even try to go to church in the snow. And for you here, you're like, that's kind of obvious. We all come to church in the snow around here, Colin. I'm from Oak Bay, and if there's a flake of snow in the air, the whole town shuts down. You don't do anything. School shut down, stores closes. It doesn't matter if there's anything on the ground. It's just in the air. It's shut down. And there was one year where we actually got snow on the ground, and my dad's like, well, we're going to church. That's what we do on Sunday, and we made it halfway there before we realized that was a bad decision, and we turned around. Right? It's just part of what we did. And for the most part, I enjoyed church. I enjoyed it. I knew the right answers to say when I was asked questions. I had fun at Sunday school. My mom would bring little toys for me so I wouldn't get bored. It was great. But as time went on, I got bored and uninterested and just kind of, I wasn't there. Luckily for me, my church was downtown Victoria, and right around the corner was an old video game arcade called Johnny Z's. Great place. So I would go in the front door of church with my parents, and I would head out the back door to hit up the video arcade. We had two services, so it was easy to be there for one service, and then my parents were busy during the second service, and it was easy to just slip out and go play some video games. It was great. I still knew about God, and I could still answer those questions, but knowing about God isn't the same as walking with God. And slowly, because I wasn't walking with God, my heart started drifting. Not all at once. Usually, that's not how it happens. It's usually one bad decision after another. One friendship that pulled me down the wrong path. One compromise that I was like, yeah, this will be okay. One lie that seemed believable to my parents. And before I knew it, I was chasing my purpose in all the wrong places. I started hanging out with people who introduced me into the world of drugs. And I got really deep into that really quick. I kept looking for something that would make me feel alive, something that would make me feel like I mattered, that I had purpose. And for a while, I honestly, I had convinced myself that everyone was secretly high all the time, and that's just how life was. Underneath it all, there was a lonely, lost boy, which was weird because I had great parents. My sisters and I got along, we were friends for the most part. I mean, there was times, but we were friends for the most part. I remember this one time I was at a youth event. I still kept up the facade of like going to church and youth so that my parents wouldn't find out about my second life. Maybe they'd give me a bit more freedom and I would have more time to pursue the extracurriculars that I wanted to pursue by keeping up that facade. So I was at this youth event and I was watching people play a random game of volleyball, except it wasn't real volleyball. It was volleyball, but we would use different things to play. It was weird and fun. It looked like they were truly happy. I didn't really want to play, so I kind of sat on the sidelines. And I have this like memory of like, man, these people look happy. They look like they're enjoying life, and I'm just kind of back here on the sidelines in the dark. It felt like I didn't really have much purpose or meaning, and I didn't know it at that time, but I was in a pit. And David never actually tells us what that pit was. And I'm pretty sure that's intentional, because your pit might not look anything like mine. Maybe your pit isn't addiction. Maybe it's shame or bitterness or grief or trying to prove yourself or years of just pretending everything's okay when it's not. The pit changes, but the God who meets people there doesn't. And looking back on it now, I thought like, hey, God was trying to rescue me from drugs, from this life that I was going down. But I didn't realize that he had like bigger plans for me. Our psalm continues with verse 3-5. It says, he set my feet on a rock. He gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see it and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, who does not look to the proud, who does not turn aside to false gods. Many, Lord my God, are the wonders you have done and the things you have planned for us. I think one of the most like beautiful words in this psalm is a little tiny one. He set my feet upon a rock. David doesn't say, I finally found solid ground. God places him there. And that's what grace is. God doesn't just rescue him from something, he rescues him to somewhere. He gives him stability. He gives him a new direction, new identity, a foundation to build off of. And so, like I said earlier, I was like falling deeper into this pit of addiction. I fell deeper, and it was like daily and multiple times daily, and I was living for myself, just chasing that next high. And I'm not going to go into details, but it got bad enough one night that I was brought home by the cops. If you want to know more about it, you can ask me after the service. But my parents, rather than getting mad or getting angry and upset towards me, even though like as a parent now, I see that happened in the background, that they were mad and angry and upset with me, but towards me, they didn't do that. Instead, they decided to use this as a time to try and refocus my heart. I think they knew more of what was going on than I was trying to be secret about, right? As you do. I was still grounded, though. They still grounded me from basically everything, except, ironically, the only place they let me go was youth group. And I had to go on this church retreat that was coming, this youth retreat that was coming up. And at the time, it felt like punishment. And like looking back, I can kind of make fun of it and laugh at it because in reality, there's sometimes God's greatest invitations to us come through inconveniences. They come disguised as inconveniences. And I didn't know it yet, but God was already moving towards me. There was this youth leader who kind of took time and invested in me. He didn't have answers. He didn't try and fix me overnight. He just kept showing up. He kept hanging out with me, taking me to do different stuff, to have fun. He listened, he cared, he made time for me. He helped me see Jesus differently than I had before. He showed me that you could have fun. You could do different things and enjoy life and have this excitement without needing to be high. I think that was his goal. He showed me what it was like to live in the light. And even though I was kind of wheels were starting to turn and I was starting to learn these kind of things, I still kept my bad habits. I just was more sneaky about it. Sometimes God rescues people through miracles, and sometimes he rescues people through ordinary people. I don't think we can ever underestimate what God can do through someone who simply decides to love another person well. God used Mike in my life. We continued to hang out. He continued to hang out with me and my friends. We would do just random stuff like jumping off the dock into the water, running around downtown at night, just having fun. One of my other punishments was that I had to go on this youth retreat. I had to go to camp for a few nights. I had to play games, swim in the lake, hang out with friends. Horrible, right? Horrible parents punish me this way. Honestly, while I was there, I was surrounded by people who were having the time of their life, who were laughing, who were connecting and enjoying themselves and just having a blast. But when I was there, I did not feel joyful. I did not feel like I belonged. I felt like I just wanted to leave and go get high. And it's not because I wasn't included. I was included. I was in doing all the things and with them. I just didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like I was just in this darkness. People were super friendly, super kind to me, and I just felt like I was surrounded by darkness. I could clearly see people, and they looked like they were in the light, and I was kind of like in the back. And I just couldn't get there. And like every camp retreat, you have the speaker who comes and talks to you and tells you a bunch of funny stories and that kind of stuff. And I honestly don't remember details about him. I even tried to remember his name, and I couldn't remember his name. But I remember the idea. He talked about purpose. He said God wants to use ordinary people, that God has been restoring this broken world that we live in. He's been restoring the darkness that is around us and bringing light. And he invites us to join him while he does that. And I remember sitting there, almost laughing, not me. No way. I've got way too much baggage. I've made way too many mistakes. I've got way too much regret in my life, and I'm kind of laughing about this. And then something happens that I'm probably never going to forget. That kind of laugh, that half laughter that you have, it broke, and I started crying. Like proper ugly crying, bawling. And I got up, I couldn't take it. I got up and I walked out of the room, and I just went and sat on the ground outside. And this youth leader who had been investing in me, he followed me out. And he asked me if I wanted company. And I didn't. I did not want company. I wanted to run away. I wanted to hide. I wanted to get high. I wanted to lose myself. I wanted to be anywhere but there. And I opened my mouth to say, "No, leave me alone, man." And the word yes comes out of my mouth. So he sits beside me in silence, lets me cry, doesn't rush me, doesn't ask me, doesn't preach at me. He just sits with me for probably a good 15, 20 minutes. People have now left the sanctuary and are going out to play their night game and that kind of stuff, and I'm still sitting there with him. And eventually he looked at me and he asked, he's like, "Colin, do you want to start living for God?" And in my head, I'm preparing to say no. I'm like, no, not for me, not what I want. And that's honestly what I intended to say, but when I opened my mouth, again, the word yes came out. Now, I don't know how to fully explain that, right? But God had been pursuing me long before I realized that I was looking for him. And somewhere deep in my being, he knew that that's exactly what I needed. And I think that's what Psalm 40 is showing us. God doesn't wait until David gets his life together. He reaches into the pit and lifts him out, and he sets his feet on a rock. God doesn't simply forgive David for what he's done or forgive us for what he's done. He gives David a place to stand. Verses 6-8 say this: "Sacrifice and offering you do not desire, but my ears have opened. Burnt offerings and sin offerings you do not require. Then I said, here I am, I have come. It is written about me in the scroll, and I desire to do your will. My God, your law is within my heart." Here's the thing I love about this psalm is most of us kind of we expect David to end the psalm after he's rescued. He's like, "Yeah, I'm rescued, the end, period, move on to the next one." But that's not where the psalm goes. David suddenly starts talking about obedience and sacrifice and delighting in God's will. Why? Because the rescue was never the destination. Relationship was the destination. Purpose was the destination. God wasn't interested in simply getting David out of trouble. He wanted David's whole life. And that's exactly what I discovered. After that retreat, after that night, after that sense, I had this sense that I was pulled out of the dark and I was placed within the light. And that sense, that sense that I had, it started turning into decisions, to starting to live differently. And a couple months later, I ended up going to summer camp, Camp Quanos, where I spent a lot of time there. While I was there, two big things happened. The first was that I got baptized. And for the first time, it felt like I wasn't just learning about Jesus, like I was actually deciding to follow him. And the second is that I met Sarah. I got to hold her hand during a water search. And at the wise old age of 17, I knew that this was a girl I wanted to spend the whole summer with. And that summer turned into like 20 some odd years. It's wonderful, right? And we've had ups and downs, but it's been fantastic. And for years, when I was young, I thought that Christianity was mainly about like avoiding hell or trying to be a better person or just having the Sunday school answered. But that's not what I discovered. I discovered that God was already at work in the world, bringing hope where there was despair, bringing restoration where things were broken, bringing light where there was darkness. And somehow, he wanted to partner with me in the things that he was already doing. And I realized that this isn't just God rescuing me from the pit, from a life that was headed in a very bad direction. He was inviting me into his story. And this is where Psalm 40 gets even bigger, because David ultimately points beyond himself. Hebrews 10 actually quotes the psalm and applies it to Jesus. Because Jesus is the one who perfectly delighted in the Father's will. He entered our broken world. He took that brokenness on himself. He climbed down into the deepest pit of despair any of us could ever know, just so that he could lift us out onto solid ground, so he could lift us into the light. Psalm 40 isn't ultimately about David. It isn't ultimately about you or about me. It's about Jesus. That's why David finishes off this section by calling back to verse 3, and then he has something else to say. So verse 3 says, he put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. And then he continues in verse 9, I proclaim your saving acts in the great assembly. I do not seal my lips. Lord, as you know, I do not hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak of your faithfulness and your saving help. I do not conceal your love and your faithfulness from the great assembly. I love the line, he put a new song in my mouth. I've always loved that image and that line because songs, they're meant to be shared. They're meant to be sung and to be shared and to catch on and keep on going. David doesn't keep his rescue private. His story becomes worship, and his worship becomes a witness. And then the next line, many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. Did you catch that, right? Like David's rescue wasn't only for David. Other people meet God because David tells his story. And that's why we share stories. That's why we share testimonies. Not because they're remarkable, and honestly, there's parts that we'd all probably leave out from our own story. But if our stories help someone see Jesus, then it's worth telling. And this morning, rather than leave you with like this well-thought-out, catchy kind of one-line takeaway that I normally do, I'm going to leave you with 3 questions. The first is, where is your pit? God knows how you're really doing, and he isn't afraid of that pit. Second is, have you been trying to climb out of your pit on your own? The gospel, that saving grace, begins with admitting that you can't do this on your own. And finally, what story is God inviting you into? Wherever you find yourself, God hasn't finished with you. He's still writing stories. He's still investing in you. When I look back, like it's hard to believe the things that I did, the people that I hurt, the lies that I told, the things I chased, what I put my parents through. Like, hard to believe that. And not because I'm somehow perfect now. I still make mistakes. I still have ups and downs. I'm still a sinner just like everyone else. But it's hard to believe because Jesus rewrote my story and made it completely different. But I'll always remember that time when I was living in darkness. And now I know what it's like to walk in the light. Again, not perfectly, not without failure, but with purpose. And if today you feel like you're kind of stuck in that pit, maybe you spent years trying to climb out on your own, maybe you've believed that your story is already finished and there's no end to it, the good news of Psalm 40 is that the pit is not the end of the story. Jesus still climbs into pits. He still lifts people out. He still sets their feet on solid ground. And he still gives people a new song. He still invites ordinary, broken people into his mission. So whether you have known Jesus for 50 years or today is the first time you kind of feel like you're hearing his voice, he is still calling, he's still pursuing, and he is still rewriting all of our stories. Let's pray. God, thank you for today. Thank you for the chance to meet and worship and learn together and grow closer to you. And I pray that that is something that we can focus on, that we can see how you are trying to rescue us, the people you are putting into our lives that might help us see you in a different way. And I pray that we would be able to respond to your love, to your calling, and I pray that you would give us patience when we need it and understanding.